32 years. That is 11,680 days in the sky. Over 28,000 hours behind the controls of a commercial aircraft. She had flown through ice storms over Canada. She had flown through turbulence so bad that grown men cried. She had flown through engine warnings, fuel alerts, and medical emergencies in the cabin. And in all of those 32 years, through all of those hours, through every storm, every warning, every sleepless night before an early departure. Not once. Not a single time. Had anything truly, seriously, life-threateningly gone wrong. Not once. Until a Tuesday morning in October. 6 months before her retirement. At 31,000 feet over the Arizona desert. When everything that 32 years had quietly been preparing her for, finally arrived. Her name was Captain Helen Marsh. She grew up in a small town in rural Tennessee called Cookeville. Population, 12,000. One stoplight. One diner. And on clear days, the distant sound of small aircraft flying overhead on their way to Nashville. Helen was 8 years old the first time she heard that sound and looked up. She was 40 when she finally stopped looking up and started being the reason other people did. The road between those two moments was not straight. Her father was a truck driver. Her mother was a school librarian. Neither of them had ever been on a plane. When Helen told her parents at 16 that she wanted to fly, her father looked at her across the dinner table and said, not unkindly, just honestly, "Helen, we don't have that kind of money." She knew. So she did what people from Cookeville do when they want something they can't afford. She worked for it. Waitress at the diner after school. Babysitter on weekends. Every dollar saved in an envelope she kept in the back of her sock drawer labeled simply, "Up." By 19, she had enough for her first 10 hours of flight instruction at a small airfield outside town. Her instructor, a retired crop duster named Earl who smelled permanently of engine oil and black coffee, told her after her third lesson. "Most people fight the plane. You just talk to it." She never forgot that. She got her private license at 21. Her commercial at 23. Flew cargo for 2 years. Got her ADP at 26. Was hired by a regional carrier at 27. By 30, she was a first officer on a narrow-body jet. By 35, she was a captain. And for the next 27 years she flew. Quietly. Consistently. Without drama. The kind of pilot that passengers never notice, because nothing ever goes wrong. Which, in aviation, is the highest compliment there is. Here is the thing about pilots like Helen Marsh. They don't make headlines. They don't have viral moments. They don't get documentary films. They don't get statues in airports. They just show up. Every morning. Every departure. Every approach into every city in every season. They show up and they do the job so well that the 180 people behind them never once have to think about the fact that they are hurtling through the sky at 500 miles an hour in a metal tube at 35,000 feet. That invisibility, that perfect, unremarkable safety, was Helen's entire career. 32 years. Dozens of aircraft types. Hundreds of thousands of passengers carried from one city to another, and delivered safely to the people waiting for them at arrivals. She had a ritual. Every flight, just before pushback, she would look out the left window of the cockpit at the passengers still boarding through the jet bridge. She never told anyone why. But every time she looked, she would think, someone is waiting for every single person on this plane. It kept her focused. It kept her careful. It kept her, for 32 years, from ever getting comfortable enough to be careless. She was 4 days from filing her retirement paperwork when she took the assignment for Flight 8812. Atlanta to Phoenix. Tuesday morning. Clear skies. Routine. She almost didn't take it. Her co-pilot that day was a young first officer named Marcus Webb. 29 years old. 18 months into his career. Quiet, precise, and if you asked Helen, exactly the kind of pilot she liked flying with. Not flashy. Just solid. They completed pre-flight checks together at 6:40 a.m. Everything was normal. At 7:22 a.m., Flight 8812 lifted off runway 26L. Helen looked out the window as they climbed through the clouds. She thought about the retirement party her daughter was planning. She thought about the garden she was finally going to have time for. She thought, 6 more months. Then done. She had no idea that the next 90 minutes were going to rewrite the final chapter of her career. Here is the first thing nobody reported. 3 days before Flight 8812, a maintenance engineer named Roy Delgado had flagged a hydraulic system anomaly on the aircraft. It was minor, within tolerance. He noted it in the log, recommended monitoring, and signed off. His supervisor reviewed it. Approved it for service. The aircraft flew 4 flights after that note. Nobody told Helen. Not because anyone was hiding it. Just because, within the rules, there was nothing to tell. The reading was within limits. The aircraft was legal to fly. But Roy Delgado had a feeling. He said so, to a colleague, quietly, over coffee in the maintenance bay on Monday morning. That hydraulic read is trending wrong. It's fine today. Might not be fine next week. Nobody wrote that part down. At 9:47 a.m., Flight 8812 was at 31,000 feet over the Arizona desert. The seatbelt sign was off. Breakfast service was almost done. Marcus was flying. Helen was monitoring, the way she always monitored. Quietly. Watching everything. At 9:51 a.m., the hydraulic system B pressure dropped. Not dramatically. Not a master warning. Just a reading that moved in the wrong direction. Helen saw it. She looked at it for 3 seconds. And something in her, something built from 32 years of looking at instruments and trusting her instincts, said, "This is not a sensor." She took the controls from Marcus. He looked at her. She said calmly, quietly, the way she always said everything, "I've got it. Watch the hydraulics." 40 seconds later, the pressure dropped again. This time it kept dropping. And then the bang. Not an explosion. Not a Hollywood fireball. Just a sharp, mechanical bang from beneath the aircraft. The kind of sound that has no business being heard at 31,000 feet. The kind of sound that, once you've heard it, you cannot unhear. The hydraulic system B failed completely. On a commercial aircraft, hydraulic system B controls several critical functions, including certain flight control surfaces and the normal brake system. They still had System A. They still had the electric backup. But the aircraft, Helen's aircraft, the one she had flown 4 times before, was now operating with 1/3 of its hydraulic capability gone. And they were 200 miles from Phoenix. What happened next was not dramatic. It was not loud. It was not the kind of thing that makes for a good action sequence. It was methodical. Quiet. Controlled. Helen ran the checklist. Marcus called out each item. ATC was notified. Phoenix approach was briefed on the situation. Fire trucks were requested to stand by. She flew the approach manually. Every adjustment precise. Every input deliberate. The passengers felt a slightly firmer landing than usual. That was all. That was the entire emergency, as the passengers experienced it. What they did not see was Helen's hands. Marcus would later tell the incident investigators. "I've flown with a lot of captains. I've never seen anyone fly an approach that clean under those conditions. She didn't rush a single thing. It was like she had all the time in the world." He paused. Then he said, "I don't think she did. I think she just made it feel that way." Here is the second thing nobody reported. After they landed, after the passengers deplaned, After the emergency vehicle stood down and the paperwork began, Helen sat alone in the cockpit for 4 minutes. Marcus had stepped out to speak with the ground crew. For 4 minutes, Helen Marsh sat in the left seat of that aircraft and did not move. She was not crying. She was not shaking. She was just sitting. The way you sit when something big has passed through you and you need a moment before you go back to being the person everyone else needs you to be. Marcus came back. Saw her sitting there. Said nothing. He just sat down in the right seat. And they sat together, quietly, without speaking, for about 90 seconds. Then Helen took a breath, picked up the incident report form, and started writing. She never mentioned those 4 minutes to anyone. Until the retirement speech. The 90 days that followed. The incident investigation took 11 weeks. The hydraulic failure was traced back to a seal degradation, the exact component Roy Delgado's trending data had pointed toward 3 days earlier. His maintenance note was reviewed. His verbal concern, the one nobody wrote down, was reconstructed through interviews with his colleague. Roy Delgado was not disciplined. But 3 things changed at the airline as a direct result of Flight 8812. First, the process for flagging trending anomalies was revised. A maintenance technician's verbal concern, if documented even informally, now triggers a mandatory second review before the aircraft is cleared for the next flight cycle. Second, the simulator training for hydraulic system B failures was updated to include degraded approach scenarios with crosswind components. Because Flight 8812 had a crosswind. A small one. But it was there. And the old simulator scenario didn't include it. Third, and this is the quiet one, the one that doesn't appear in any official report. Several senior captains at the airline, after reading the incident summary, voluntarily requested recurrent hydraulic failure training sessions. Not because they were required to. Because they read what Helen had done and wanted to make sure they could do the same. Nobody asked them to. That is what a 32-year career of invisible excellence looks like when it finally becomes visible. That is what a 32-year career of invisible excellence looks like when it finally becomes visible. The airline gave her a small ceremony at the gate. Her daughter flew in from Denver. Her son drove up from Nashville. Her old instructor, Earl, the crop duster, was 81 years old and not in great health. But he sent a card. It said, "You always talk to it. I knew you'd be fine." She kept it. She has a garden now. Tomatoes, mostly. Some herbs. A small apple tree that she planted the week after retirement, and checks every morning the way she used to check instruments, quietly, carefully, looking for anything that might be trending wrong. She teaches once a month at an aviation academy 2 towns over. Not emergency procedures. Not technical systems. Human factors. Crew resource management. The psychology of staying calm when everything wants you to panic. She tells the students one thing at the end of every session. She says, "The emergency doesn't test who you become under pressure. It reveals who you already were before it arrived." Then she asks them, "Who are you already becoming, right now, in the ordinary flights?" The students write it down. Every single one of them. Helen Marsh's career was not defined by Flight 8812. It was expressed by it. 32 years of showing up. Of looking out the window at passengers boarding and thinking about the people waiting for them. Of trusting her instincts when instruments said one thing and her gut said another. Of staying, always, just a little bit more careful than the rules required. None of that was visible. Until it was. And that is the thing I keep thinking about. We spend so much time waiting for the moment that defines us. The big test. The emergency. The flight where everything goes wrong. But the moment doesn't build you. The ordinary flights build you. The Tuesday mornings when nothing is wrong and you still check everything twice. The quiet shifts when no one is watching and you still do it right. The 32 years before the emergency, That is where Helen Marsh was made. The Arizona desert just showed the rest of us what was already there. Think about your ordinary flights. The ones where nothing is wrong. The ones nobody will ever write about. That's where it's happening. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Next week, the air traffic controller who was covering someone else's shift when Helen's Mayday call came in. His story is just as quiet and just as important. Subscribe. It's worth it.